Welcome to the family office. Planning for the people who matter most.
Small packages.
And foreplay matters. Take your time. Don't go right in for it and go for the gusto. You got to take your time and slow motion for you. Okay. Finesse. Finesse is the answer here, guys. Okay. Finesse.
Oh, that's funny. Right.
Speaking of finesse, Len, I know you are celebrating right now, and I'm celebrating right now because I think it was a very successful meeting. I think is probably some of the biggest news out today is obviously last week, the Chinese, I don't even know what you call it, the White House Summit.
The CEO Summit.
The CEO Summit. Okay, I guess that's the best way to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you had so many top dogs there, and I thought it was pretty amazing. It was well documented, and I think it was a very good meeting. It was a very powerful meeting, very strategic meeting. But I've been asking a lot of people, I say, hey, what do you think about this? Why? First time since we've been there in about 10 years, which was like Obama was there and Trump was there in his last term. But why was it done this way? The signal was very telling, I think, from my perspective. But I'm curious, Len, to know what your perspective is, because I think it was done very, very tastefully, very masterfully. And I think, again, a lot of presidents get ridiculed for foreign policy and how they handle foreign policy, and especially how Trump is alienating our allies and I think Trump's foreign policy was on display here, and I think his candor was on display here, and I think he was well executed. I thought it was very well respectively executed. So, Len, where are your thoughts on with the CEO Summit? The CEO Summit, the meeting of the minds.
Well, one thing that I'll say about President Trump is that he talks a lot about people when they're not directly in his face, with the exception, I would say, of reporters. Sometimes he goes in pretty hard on them. But a lot of times what happens is, like, for example, when he would talk about the president from North Korea, and he'd call him Rocket Man, but then when they met, he's always very gracious. He's always very charismatic. When he talked about Zelensky, when he came and, talked pretty badly about him and talked badly about Putin, but face to face, he's a very gracious communicator. And I think it's so interesting because it's almost like he becomes two different people, and he understands when he's face to face with somebody, especially a person who's in a position of power. He understands how to communicate with them. And one thing about the Chinese culture that I've learned is that saving face and really giving people the opportunity to exercise their position of authority is very, very important. And I think President Trump had an understanding of that. Having said that, I would definitely, I'm not as optimistic about the outcome, at least what I'm hearing from you. I'm not as optimistic. And here's the reason why. I think that China did a very fantastic job in terms of how they welcomed the delegation and the pomp and circumstance of it and the level of respect they showed the United States delegation. I think that was fantastic. I think the interaction between President Trump and President Xi was very good because both of them walked away not having to feel like they necessarily lost. Okay, but if you look at the reason why Trump went, I think if I had to do a direct comparison, I would say Xi walked out a little bit more ahead. And here's the reason why. He was very intentional about bringing up Taiwan in the very beginning. And he said, look, I just want to be clear that if there's some issues with Taiwan, that could escalate to some escalating tensions between the United States and China. So I want you to know, like, that's the most important part. Now, Trump was very smart in that he didn't say, oh, well, they're a great ally of ours. He pretty much used them as a bargaining chip, if you will. So, but I think Xi walked away saying, okay, to my country, my fellow countrymen, you can see that we bring leverage to the conversation, that the president brought in a delegation of his most powerful CEOs because we're players on the world scene. And so now I think that's the win for China on China's side. I was looking for a win for the CEOs, which is why they went. Xi didn't say any promises. He gave them an opportunity. The CEO of Boeing, Kelly Ortberg, at first, China said they were going to buy 500 planes from the U.S. They committed to 200, and because of that, their stock fell. So I could go and talk more about the particulars, but I would say overall it was positive. But I was hoping for more of an outcome as it related to the Strait of Hormuz and getting more clarity about that. There was no real clarity about that, and about the progression of the war and China's stance between Iran and the United States, getting that, not like exacerbating that situation. So I would say overall it was positive. If my take on you giving it a 10, if my take is correct, I would say it's an 8.
I would agree with you on an 8. I don't know if I would necessarily say it's a 10.
Okay.
But what I would say is that above and beyond anything is that it's actually meaningful execution, meaning it's effort.
Yes, I would agree with that 100%.
It's kind of almost like we see people inside working, okay? Because you're a diplomacy guy, you like diplomacy. That's a pretty big diplomatic move to make. I
would agree.
I don't know the last time you've seen a country of that size, you know what I mean, come in and say, "Oh, cool, let me." And by the way, not just say bring people there to the meeting, but actually host a meeting as well. Be on the opportunity side to say, hey, we're going to host a meeting. So I don't know very many European nations that are doing that right now. I don't know how business is being conducted. I think you can look at it and look at it from one perspective as well, Len, and say, hey, look, this further strengthens a coalition between the United States and China. I mean, if I'm the European Union, I'm definitely going, ooh, a little bit, because NATO's not so strong. And I've talked about it before. I think the New World Order is the United States, China, Japan, India, and Russia. I think those are the power players in the world. So I think you're seeing that's furthering to unfold. I think the interesting thing about it, though, is that we're going to bring semiconductor manufacturing. I think that was one of the bigger things that came out of it, is this semiconductor manufacturer coming back to the United States. Because here's the problem with Taiwan. As soon as semiconductor manufacturing gets taken off the table and the United States brings that back to the United States, it's game over. That bargaining chip becomes moot. So China doesn't really have a very strong footing in using that. And I think the reason why they're so slow to make it move on it, Len, is because they don't want to make, I wouldn't want to say a United States move, but they would not want to look like everyone else is. Because they would really break that bravado of being, we're just this big peaceful entity. Because I don't think they're really ready to show yet that they're not. They're like that massive dragon in Lord of the Rings, or not Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, that hasn't come out yet, or not Game of Thrones, the prequel Game of Thrones. You ever seen it? You ever watch Game of Thrones, Len? Did you ever watch that? You want to watch it. You want to watch it.
I don't want to get hooked, man. That's the problem, because it's like multiple seasons, and if I start watching it, I'm going to lose so much time.
But aren't you going to go away and take like a vacation, like a real vacation, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like 4 weeks, a month? Aren't you going to do that soon?
Eventually.
Okay, so when you do that, put it on the top of your queue, and you can take the whole thing. But there's this massive dragon in the Prelude one. It's called House of Dragon or whatever. It might be something called that, right?
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, this big Mama Gemmo comes out, and it's and then bam, he kills everybody. And that's really what China's play is. They're like this giant peaceful panda animal, but they're really not. And they're just like sneaky about it. But I think that it further underscores the point that as soon as semiconductor manufacturing comes back to the United States, it's game over. And we're already doing that in Malaysia, and all the Indo-Pacific. And then, but I think that China and the United States have a mutual understanding of that. And I think if more people need to understand, I'm going to throw it over to you, Len, because I see you're coming in hot. I think people need to also have an understanding that the United States has always, and China have always really had favorable dealings with each other. I mean, the United States really looked out for China after World War II as well. And before that, I think, if history serves, it's a little fuzzy, but the way things were going down with Japan and China, or the way that they were China. Anyways, at some point, there was a lot. The China and the United States have a history, and that history has usually been pretty good.
So I have an interesting question for you based on what you just said, because before, on a few episodes back, especially right around the time when the United States went and got Maduro from Venezuela, one of the things we were talking about is the strategic maneuvering with regard to oil and how that could put a stranglehold on China. And then when you couple that with the Strait of Hormuz, that puts even more of a stranglehold on China. So do you think that this summit will lead to more diplomacy, which would mean, if that diplomacy is real, then the United States would back down from its strategic moves to put a stranglehold with regard to China's access to oil? Do you think that changes the trajectory?
I think it does, because in regards to U.S.'s move in Venezuela, that could be looked at in a lot of different ways. Now, ultimately, if you're looking at it, you could look at it from the perspective of, oh shit, China, United States cut off China's oil supply, which in respects or in technicalities it did, right? But also from a higher level picture, you got to look at it and go, look, the United States is securing its hemisphere. Why hasn't anybody secured their hemisphere? Why have they allowed Iran to be rogue? Like, for example, these protests that are going on right now with Cuba, with all these people saying, oh my God, 11,000 Cubans, or whatever the number is. I'm probably wrong here. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not discrediting it or trying to tone it down or trying to take away from the suffrage of anybody in any light at all. But I'm trying to simply illustrate is that, look, this is happening right now in Cuba, where all of a sudden these people are going, oh my God, the blockade because of the United States, Cuba's suffering. No, it's not. Cuba is not suffering because of the United States. And a lot of people that suffered under communism are speaking out against that and saying, look, before I came to America, I survived on what I ate for breakfast was water and sugar because of communism. And see, that's where I go, wait a minute. You're telling me that the great country of Cuba is suffering because of a weird dictatorship in the Middle East? Because you can't get your oil there anymore? But in reality, what you ought to be doing is going, wait a minute, how come I can't get my oil from a friendly country in my hemisphere? Oh, wait a minute, because I don't want to play ball in my hemisphere and I want to continue to be a bad seed. So see, the United States controls its hemisphere, and in doing so controlled Venezuela, which it did in the past anyways. Before Maduro got there, we had a working relationship with them. Right? That's why Chevron put all that infrastructure in there. So then you fast forward to today, why is nobody securing that infrastructure? Why is nobody securing their hemisphere? So that's where I would look at China and go, maybe that China or Russia has to be a little bit more responsible with securing their hemisphere and not allowing the Middle East to be the Middle East. I don't know if they're the dictatorship there, or they're the strong party there, or the strong country there. And the United States did that in Venezuela. But I think
Russia did it more. I think Russia has been more strategic in securing its hemisphere because it's had to. But I think the significant difference between the two is China has over 1 billion people. And so because of the fact that China is starting to increase its standard of living, especially over the last between 50 and 60 years, they're starting to consume more. And so Russia has a fraction of China's population, but they have more natural resources than China as well. And so because Russia has the ability to control its own oil flows, they can take care of their population, whereas China has to rely outside because they don't have the natural resources. And
But see, that's the thing, though. Okay, just like when semiconductors are no longer an issue, that Taiwan's no longer a play, right? As soon as we get off oil, which is going to be very fast here, nuclear energy is gonna be it. It's game over for oil. So at this point, China doesn't have to rely on oil. You get what I mean?
That's why they're going to solar. Yeah, but I think that change is going to happen a long time.
Big time. The solar infrastructure is huge there.
Yeah, and I want to touch on your point about the semiconductors, because I did a little bit of research. I wasn't doing it in preparation for our conversation here, but just out of curiosity, I was just trying to get an understanding of why so much of the world's semiconductors come out of Taiwan. Yes, and it's because of the way they're situated, the weather patterns, the mountains, and all of those convergence of topography and weather all create this environment where their semiconductors are pristine in terms of just the quality and clarity and cleanliness of them. And so it's very, very difficult to replicate the quality of that here in the United States. So I think
like you're growing grapes. It sounded like you're growing a championship bottle of wine.
That's right. That's right. Like champagne comes from Champagne for a reason, because of area. Exactly. And so, and likewise, Taiwan just has the ability to create the world's best semiconductors. And if you start to denigrate or degrade the quality of those semiconductors, now that impacts the quality of all of technology that sits on top of that. So I don't think the transition is going to be as quickly as people would want, because otherwise we would have ditched Taiwan a long time ago, because strategically it's tenuous because of the relationship between China and Taiwan. If we had the ability to do that in Cupertino or in, Texas or somewhere like that, we'd have done that in a heartbeat.
Enter the modern day space race, because think about when this stuff is manufactured on the moon, and semiconductor processes are done in absolute perfection of cleanliness of space in a completely manufactured, controlled environment on the moon or orbiting the moon. And that's why Elon Musk is such a freaking genius, because he's completely cornered the market 10, 20, 15 years before anyone else even realized what he was doing.
Okay, not to get nerdy
this year.
Probably so. Not to be a super nerd.
$850 billion or something like that net worth.
Yeah.
It's not even about money anymore at that point.
Okay, but going back to the whole semiconductor thing, one of the biggest issues right now on the moon is all of the dust that's there, and it's really, really fine dust. So even when people walk out with their astronaut suits and when different machinery lands on the moon, the dust is so fine that the best filtration systems haven't been built yet to keep that dust out. So that's a big problem. So if there's a way to orbit and find ways to go around that, I think that's going to work out better. But I didn't want to nerd out, but I just wanted to make sure that, just to touch on that point
really quickly. Every now and then.
Yeah, and I just think that the semiconductor issue is going to be a lot more difficult to solve. But I think nuclear energy, that's the next move. But let's go back to China and wrap that up, man, in terms of the summit and the CEOs. What do you think the CEOs are walking away feeling based on what you saw happen in China? How would you walk away if you were them?
I think they're walking away pretty happy. I think there was commitment. China's now allowed to buy the second or the third best gen from NVIDIA. So I think they're walking away from this with a couple things. Number one, I think they're walking away with the ability to, hey, look, China's going to start being an importer instead of an exporter, right? And the agreement of that. Obviously, the challenge always with that is the stolen IP thing, right? Because, I mean, they live to deconstruct, right? Which is great. I mean, that's fine. I mean, we do it all the time, supposedly in Area 51, right? So, I mean, where did the microwave oven come from, Len? Right. So, but I think they're also walking away with a very clear mandate from Trump that we need to coalesce again in the United States, and they all need to be on the same freaking page. And this isn't about patriating money outside the United States anymore. This is about understanding that the number one thing or the number one concern in a capitalism is obviously a business's ability to generate a profit, right? That's the only thing. A business's number one thing is to generate profits and make profits for itself, right? And nobody can ever lose sight of that. You can't become ignorant to that fact and become angry at corporations when they make a profit, because they're designed to do that. That's what they're designed to do. Mm-hmm. Now, however, having said that, they also need to then make sure that their number two priority after making money is making sure that they are a champion for the United States, and that they conduct themselves in a way that business, if the business decision is good for the business's profit but not good for America, I'm sorry, you can't do it. I think companies need to go back to understanding that, because you remember when you used to go back in the day and you used to make it in America because it was such a proud thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's American, because not only is it made in America, you're generating jobs in America, you're generating economic activity in America, you're generating so much activity in America. And yes, the price may be difficult to stomach because the quality of life is higher here, but that's where you got to let the system equalize a little bit. And I think you're going to start to see that again in America, is you're going to start to see that system equalize, because we're already used to paying over the price. And
so with that being said, Chris, it's always a pleasure having a conversation with you, and see you next week.
Likewise, Len.
Conversation has given you clarity on your next steps. Please share this episode with someone who's walking the same path. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss future episodes. And remember, planning ahead isn't just prudent, it's an act of care. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Family Office.